self-realization. As long as the material body is there, the necessities of the material body are allowed, but under rules and regulations, and yet we should not rely upon the control of such allowances. One has to follow those rules and regulations unattached to them, because practice of sense gratification under regulations may also lead one to go astray, as much as there is always the chance of an accident, even on the royal roads. Although they may be very difficult, very carefully maintained, no one can guarantee that there will be no danger even on the safest road. The sense enjoyment spirit has been current a very long time owing to material association. Therefore, in spite of regulated sense enjoyment, there is every chance of falling down. Therefore, any attachment for regulated sense enjoyment must also be avoided by all means, but attachment to Krishna consciousness or acting always in the loving service of Krishna detaches one from all kinds of sensory activities. Therefore, no one should try to be detached from Krishna consciousness at any stage. The whole purpose of detachment from all kinds of sense attachment is ultimately to become situated on the platform of Krishna consciousness. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Janana Shanakya Shakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutaleshvaram Rupakadamyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shriyo Shriyuda Padakamalam Shriyom Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Jagajatam Sagana Ragnatam Vitam Tam Satjivam Satvaitam Savadutam Bharajana Saitam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagalita Shikshakam Vitam Sha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jat Pate Gopesha Gopka Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamama Haripriya Vankha Kalptrabhisha Kripa Sindhaivisha Patinam Pavanabhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namah Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutali Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamani. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharani Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paskachai Desatarani. Srila Prabhupada Ki. After having explained in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita that we are not the body but the spirit soul, Lord Krishna starts to explain in the third chapter, which we are discussing now, that how to act as a spirit soul and not as the body. Krishna said in 3:9, Shakhnachta karmano yatra loko karma bandhana. Shakhnachta karmano yatra. So one should do all one's karma, all one's activities as a sacrifice for Krishna, for Vishnu or Krishna. That Shakhnachta karmano yatra lokayam karma bandhana. Then Krishna says you don't have reactions, no karma anymore. But how to perform this? Because Krishna says as a sacrifice for me. Now, this spiritual action is factually done with our consciousness. You have, Krishna is explaining here the principles behind devotional service, bhakti. Devotional service. The service is the external act, the devotion is the internal. But before we can come to the internal, we must have the appropriate attitude in acting as a spirit soul. How do we act as the body, and how do we act as the spirit soul? It's important. If we don't know that difference, we cannot act properly. Therefore, Lord Krishna has explained the appropriate understanding of acting as a spirit soul in verse 30, a few verses before. And in the beginning of the commentary, Srila Prabhupada explains this verse clearly indicates the purpose of Bhagavad Gita. It's the purpose. And what is this purpose? Mayi sarvani karmani sanyasyatma shetasa nirasir nimamo bhutva yutyasva vigata svara. So Krishna says, surrendering all your works to me. Do your work for me. But to do that for Krishna, really, there are two conditions that he says. Nirasir nirmamo. So, nirasir means without desire for profit. The profit is for Krishna. That we are used to do things only in this world if we have profit. And where is that profit going? It's for the body. For the body, subtle or gross, it's all for the body. So Krishna said, Nirasir. Nirasir, you do it for me. That without asking anything for yourself. That's love. Love means pleasing the beloved without asking something in return. You give without asking something in return. So this nirasir is very important. Why are we doing? Why are we coming to the temple? Why are we praying to the deities? What are we praying to? Things for ourselves? Or are we coming to the temple to pray to Krishna? I want to please you, Krishna, that's all. What's the difference? Right? One is acting as the body, the other is acting on the spiritual platform. To act on the spiritual platform, this nirasir is very important. But Krishna says not only nirasir, nirmamo. Without thinking yourself the proprietor. Everything in this world is Krishna's energy. And we are not a proprietor. Things may be temporary under our care. You can think yourself the proprietor as long as you have the body. If you take birth again, you can't say, oh, this was my property in my previous life, so it's my property now. Will that work? No, will not work. Everything belongs to Krishna. So that vision should be there, that understanding should be there to act on the spiritual platform. This nirmamo, that everything belongs to Krishna, not to me. And then Krishna says, free from lethargy, fight to Arjuna, because that is his service for Krishna, fighting for Krishna. Very exceptional. But Yes. That is acting on the spiritual platform. But then Krishna, in the verse that we are discussing now, say, there are some paripanthina, there are obstacles to acting on that spiritual platform. To act on that spiritual platform with nirmamo and nirasir. Because when you think yourself the proprietor, when you act for profit, you act as the body. Because the profit is for the body. But what's our real profit is to get back our eternal existence. Now, to understand this first, we need to understand that we have this material body. You see, this is a hand, senses, and an arm. Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, also Srila Prabhupada very clearly in his purport. He says, below this gross arm and gross hand, there is a subtle arm and hand, a subtle body. The subtle body is there. Because the gross is built upon the subtle. We have a subtle body made of mind, intelligence, false ego. But below this body, this subtle hand, there are the spiritual senses. Srila Prabhupada said. Srila Prabhupada in many purports says, the spiritual senses are there, but they are covered over by subtle and gross senses. Now, how does it come that we have this gross body and this subtle body, covering our eternal body, our eternal senses? So we have a spiritual body, but it's covered over. So once we were in the spiritual world, in our eternal spiritual body serving Krishna. But then somehow or another we got the idea, what would it be to be Krishna for some? What would it be to be Krishna, the controller and the enjoyer? That's Krishna's position. And Krishna said to us, do you want to experience that? Are you sure that? And we said, yes, I want. And what happened at that moment? You want to have this material experience to be the controller, but that's not possible with your spiritual body. The spiritual body can only be used for transcendental activities, devotional service, serving God with love. And that's what everyone does in the spiritual world. So Krishna said, no problem, I will give you a material body. And by that you can have the experience. And I have a special place for you. So, everything what exists is the kingdom of God, the spiritual kingdom. And in the spiritual kingdom there is a black cloud, Matattva, the material world. So Krishna gave us a subtle and a gross body. And we entered this Mahatattva, this black cloud, the material world. This Mahatattva is also in the spiritual world. That's the good news, we are in the spiritual world. The bad news is we are in the prison section. And Krishna gave us this material body by which we can have these activities of eye and mind, where we can search for our own profit and think I'm the proprietor. But spiritual life means we are going to reverse that. We have to get rid of this subtle and this gross body. The gross body is built upon the subtle body. The subtle body transmigrates under the supervision of the super soul from one body to another. And you forget your previous body. That's the transmigration of the soul from one body to another. But if we decide on the strength of Krishna's words again to start performing spiritual activities, Krishna therefore speaks Bhagavad Gita, and that was the purpose of this verse. Acting as a spirit soul means nirasir, nirmamo. But Krishna says to Arjuna in this verse, there are paripantina, obstacles to act as a spirit soul. And what is that? These obstacles? Raga and dvesha, attachment and aversion to things in this world. And this attachment and aversion is what makes us identify with the body, because the attachment is for the body, and aversion also. There are things we like for the body and things we don't like. We don't like to be in the cold, but we like nice food. We like pizza. Attachment to pizza. Now, how long does it take to eat a pizza? Maybe. How long does it take? A big pizza. Minutes? Big eaters, quick eaters. Yeah. Let's say 20 minutes. And then after that, it's finished. Your so-called enjoyment. And what is this enjoyment? Your hunger is gone, right? The problem of being hungry is gone. But the problem will start again afterward. So we have attachment and aversion. And Srila Prabhupada explains the greatest attachment is a sexual attraction. And the regulation is marriage. So we have to regulate our lives, follow the rules and regulations to regulate. Krishna speaks a lot about balance, regulate. That you keep it between boundaries. Don't live to eat to live, just what you need, not more. Don't become a slave of this sense gratification. This is paripantina. So, okay, but now Krishna tells this to Arjuna, but Arjuna a little further here will say, but I want to do that, Krishna, what you say. So, not acting according to attachment and aversion, because Arjuna is averse to kill Bhishmadev. He's attached to his family. And he has to give it up to act on a spiritual platform as a servant of Krishna, following his instructions and help him in removing all the demoniac from the service of the earth. Quite an interesting service. That he's a military man and he must do his duty under Krishna's guidance. But he has this attachment and aversion. But Arjuna is saying, this paripanti now, these obstacles, this raga, dvesha, attachment and aversion, there is a force, he said, that's greater than me, that makes that I cannot give up this attachment and aversion, that forces me to act as the body and not as a spirit soul. What is this force? And that's an important question. Then Krishna answers, Kama isha, Krodha isha, Rajaguna samudva, Masana mapatam, Vidyanam yavairinam. It is lust only, Arjuna, which is the enemy number one in this world. Because what's the effect of lust? Effect of lust is that covers our spiritual consciousness and makes us identify with the body. And it makes us acting, it forces us to act according to this attachment and aversion. Because this was the effect of this lust. Avritam jnanam etimna jnanina nityavarinan kam rupena kontyam pushpurena nalenacha. That avritam, it's covering our spiritual intelligence. We cannot understand that we are a spirit soul. We think we are the body. We think in so many bodily terms, I'm this, I'm that. And duspurena nalenacha. You try to satisfy this lust, and it doesn't work. You want more and more and more and more. They did a survey in billionaires. They had just got 1 billion. And they asked, what do you want? I want 2 billion. There's no end to it. And it doesn't satisfy the heart and the soul. All these temporary things. That it's not worthwhile. So Krishna tells us to be concerned about our eternal spiritual existence and get rid of this lust in the heart. So Arjuna has heard this. Arjuna is a military man and he's heard Krishna saying about the enemy. Lust is the enemy. So Arjuna is asking, where is this enemy? Where can I find him? And how can I kill this enemy? And Krishna says the enemy is in the mind, the intelligence, the senses, the body. But to kill this enemy, Arjuna, you must know that higher than the sense objects are the senses, because the senses are attracted to the sense objects. And higher than the senses is the mind, because the experience of enjoyment comes into the mind. And higher than the mind is the intelligence, more subtle. And more subtle, more powerful than the intelligence is the soul, the self. And what's the solution? What's the solution? That it's very important here to understand that when Krishna says that the solution is that the intelligence is filled with transcendental knowledge on how to act as a spirit soul. Transcendental knowledge allows us how to act as a spirit soul, not as the body. And with that knowledge, you must engage the mind and the senses in Krishna's service, in devotional service. And that's the solution. That don't come under control of the senses, don't come under control of the mind. No, you must control the mind with your with transcendental intelligence and always engage it in activities of devotional service, transcendental activities. What happens mostly by people of the world in this world, they think they are the mind. But if you can control the mind, you are not the mind. But they think I'm the feeling, willing, thinking. Most of them think like that thinking, feeling, willing. It's like mostly people think, they look at their body and they think, I'm a man. And then when the eyes see a woman, nature is made as such that if a man, so-called man, gives attention with his mind to the body of a woman, all the senses become attracted. That's because in the other way it's also like that. The man thinks if she speaks, it's very nice, sounds nice. And a soft body, I want to touch it. And she looks so nice. So all the senses are immediately connected with it. And the mind says, yes, that's what we want. We want to give enjoyment to the senses. And the mind says, and the intelligence says to the mind, but what with morality? Maybe she's married. And the mind says to the intelligence, you old fool, do something practical. Then the intelligence says, okay, you could write her a letter and you promise her the sun and the moon, and you can throw some stars but don't sign the letter. Because just behind her is a very strong man, could be her husband. So that's the position of the conditioned soul. Conditioned soul means I become a slave of my senses. But Krishna says, give up this slavery. You can only give up this slavery if you conquer lust. And you can only conquer lust when you act on the spiritual platform to transcendental knowledge. Engage your mind and senses always in the service of Krishna. Srila Prabhupada gave once a morning lecture, and one devotee asked a question during the lecture. That was in the beginning of our movement. He asked the question, Prabhupada, do you have lust in your mind? And Prabhupada humbly said, yes. But, of course, he was pure, but he said yes. But then later that day, Prabhupada came out of the temple and a devotee was going to drive him to another temple, but the devotee that asked this question in the morning class opened the door for Prabhupada. And Prabhupada looked at him and said, yes, I've lust in my mind, but I don't have time for it, because he's always engaged in devotional service. No time for this business. And that's very important. We must always engage our mind and senses in the service of Krishna. If we don't do that, then the mind will engage us in sense gratification, in lusty business. So that's the practice of Bhakti Yoga. Therefore, pure devotional service must have these two qualities. Ahaituk apatriyata. Ahaituk, only to serving Krishna. And without interruption. You cannot interrupt it. You cannot give a break. We chant Hare Krishna and you stop. No, the mind will come in between. Always engage yourself in devotional service. It's like a man. A man he got a bottle. And in the bottle is a jinn. A jinn is a kind of spirit. So he opened the bottle and the jinn came out, and the spirit bowed down for the person and said, I'm your servant. I will do whatever you ask. But if you don't engage me for 1 second, I will kill you. And the man said, you clean the kitchen. And the spirit was cleaning the kitchen, and then he was thinking, if he comes back, what I'm going to say. And then the spirit come back, and now the bathroom. And so he was thinking, if all rooms are done, what am I going to say? So when all the rooms were done, then he said to the spirit, no, now you go outside, you see this tree here, you climb from down to the top of the tree. When you are on the top of the tree, you jump to the next tree and come down. Then you go to the next tree, you go up again, you climb up onto the top, you jump to the next tree, you come down again, and like that you do all the trees in the forest, and when you are finished, you start again. So that's how we got rid of it. But it means, if our mind is idle, if it's fixed on things in this world, what happens? Dayate fisyapum samsangaste shibachayate sangha sangyate kama kamkod vijayate. Then you meditate, dayate, I want to enjoy this. And then the lusty desires come up, and then you try to fulfill these desires, but then it doesn't give you satisfaction. 1 billion, 2 billion, it doesn't give you satisfaction. And you get frustrated. That's what you get. That's the material world. And that's very dangerous. This lust can never be fulfilled. And it's enemy number 1. Because this lust is increases the paripantina, the attachment and aversion, and increases our identification with the body. And we cannot understand that we are a spirit soul. Therefore, this lust is our enemy number 1. And what's the solution? Always engage your mind and senses, your body, everything you have in the service of Krishna. And how to do that? You require spiritual knowledge, transcendental knowledge. And that's the reason why Lord Krishna, in the next chapter, speaks about transcendental knowledge. We need transcendental knowledge to act on the spiritual platform. But that would bring us too far to go in the 4th chapter, but please read it. And if you have now any questions, please. Any questions? Yes?
This verse, Dayato Vishayantum, that we contemplate the objects of the senses and then attachment, lust, frustration. But it seems that the only thing around us are objects of the senses, at least in our understand. So how can we get rid of the contemplation?
Yeah, so that's a good question. He says everything around us are objects for the sense, for objects for sense gratification. How can we give it up? That's like a sexually inclined people per person sees always the opposite sex as an opportunity to engage in sexual activities. Because he has that created that consciousness. We have created that consciousness that everything around us is for our sense gratification. And that's a problem. That's caused by lust. Therefore, transcendental knowledge means Vidya Vinaya Sampane Brahmana Gava Hastini Sunisevshva Pakecha Panida Samadakshana. See the spirit soul in everyone's heart, also in the animals, in all, everywhere. That spiritual vision. And sees that everyone is a servant of Krishna. Many may have forgot it. Many may not identify as such, but that spiritual vision that everything around us is the energy of Krishna, and is meant for his service. And that's a spiritual vision. That spiritual vision will awaken in us if we hear about Krishna. Then we understand everything is Krishna's energy. And if we hear about Krishna, we will understand that we are not Krishna. Krishna is the source of everything. We are his servant. And when you understand that, you develop a service attitude towards Krishna. And you understand, I'm factually his servant. And then you start engaged in his service. And by engaging in that service, your heart will become purified of lust, anger, greed, madness, illusion, envy. Because that's the problem, why we cannot see things as Krishna's property for his enjoyment. So this nirasir nirmama is our problem, and therefore we see things into illusion. But we must stop contemplating on things for our enjoyment. We must learn to contemplate on things that, how can I use this in Krishna's service? A difference in consciousness of a devotee and a people of this world. Like someone sees a beautiful flower. The materialist will think, I want this flower, give it to my wife, or I want to sniff on it. But a devotee sees the flower and thinks, this is a beautiful work of art from Krishna. He's the greatest artist. And I want also this flower to offer it to my deity, to offer it to Krishna. And that's the difference of consciousness we have to create, to develop. Does that help? Okay, something else? Yes, please.
In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna or Prabhupada in the purport, he talks about lust being like a perverted form of our love for Krishna. Can you develop on that?
Yeah, that's lust is a perverted form of love for Krishna. So this is explained in Chaitanya Chaitamrita. There, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami has a whole chapter explaining the difference between lust and love. Factually, we don't know in this world what love is. We think it's lust. We don't have experience that to have the experience of love, that we must just redirect our consciousness from the understanding that everything is Krishna's property and is meant for his service. And if we start to serve, to use everything in Krishna's service, then it becomes an act of love. That act of love means pleasing the beloved without asking something in return, just for his benefit. But lust is different. Lust, it's not out of love. We want opportunities for sense gratification. So love between man and woman. But yes, why is that so-called love there? Because they have a body and they are attracted to each other on the bodily platform. Therefore, to develop that love, that there is the Grihastha ashram. In the Grihastha ashram, we also marry under regulations, Srila Prabhupada says. But what's the difference between a Grihastha and a Grihamedi, or a sense enjoyer? In this world, between man and woman, if they want to come together to support each other in spiritual life, then they create a different form of relationship. They have 4 kinds of relationships. The first is a sexual craving, therefore you are attracted to each other. The second level is they do things together. That eating, sleeping, things together. The third level of relationship is they become friendship. And the fourth level of the relationship, and that's the difference, that is important in the Grihastha ashram, they support each other in spiritual life. They get into spiritual activities together in the morning, evening, that they do puja together, they chant Hare Krishna, they hear the scriptures, they engage in preaching, so many spiritual activities. Now in the Grihastha ashram, the idea is that these lower relationships become less and less important. And finally, when one comes to the Vanaprastha stage, only the highest remains, supporting each other in spiritual life. So it's an ashram for spiritual advancement. So that is very important to understand the difference. Does that help? So, thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Sai Prabhupada.